Welcome to the Breath of God. This is a channel dedicated to studying the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. So today we're going to pick up our study through the Bible in the book of Ecclesiastes. And this book is the pursuit of meaning. And we have Solomon's pursuit of meaning here recorded. And what Solomon does is he takes you through his process. He starts out meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And then he moves to a place of understanding. Oh, there's nothing better for man to do than to enjoy his work or enjoy his time with his wife. And then he finally moves to the conclusion of the matter. So you begin to see Solomon's journey. And this is a really important book in that you can follow one man's journey from complete meaninglessness to fearing God and keeping his commandments. And I like this book. Solomon took the time and he writes out his journey. He even talks about so many of the things that he did that were really not that great, if I'm to be honest. But this whole journey, and it is a journey. There's things that we don't understand in the beginning. Then we grasp some understanding, and then we come to the conclusion of the matter. So here, when you start out in verse 1, you see he says, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And then he says, I set out what is worthwhile. I set out to figure out what is worthwhile for man to do with the few days God has given him under the heavens. So it starts out meaningless, formless. There's a misery and a futility in the tone of his writing. And then as you begin to make progress towards the middle, he begins to come up with a handful of what I call interim conclusions. These are not the final conclusions. This is what I've learned. The meaning, it goes from meaningless to meaning. Some form you begin to see. Some enjoyment. Some purpose. And he even states this, I'll just state one of the spots. He says this in verse 24. He says, a man can do nothing better than to eat and to drink and to find satisfaction in his work. This too I see from the hand of God. So it's forward progression through this process. And I suspect everybody to some degree has to go through this process of walking it out. It's a journey to the Lord. And we see this with Solomon. And this is not the final conclusion. And you'll hear people say, what he said wasn't right. And that's true. Some of these conclusions, and again, they're not the conclusions. They're the interim things that he began to come up with. This is his learnings at this point in his journey. And then we get to the end. We see the conclusion of the matter. We see the finished process. We see certainty. And he says, at the end of the book, he finally reaches his end. He says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Meaning, there's nothing better to do than to fear God and keep his commandments. It's like the Westminster Catechism, which is to know God and enjoy him forever. And everything will be brought to judgment. Everything that is hidden will be disclosed, whether it's good or evil. There will be a final evaluation. And that is the place we need to live from. we need to know that there will be a final evaluation of our life. We will have to give an account. And he said there's nothing better than for a man to do. He says the whole duty, the whole reason for man's existence is to fear God and to keep his commandments. That is a good word. It reminds me of Genesis in chapter 1. You see the process of God in Genesis chapter 1. It was formless. It was void. It was dark. And the Spirit of God was hovering. And then you see the creative process begin. God speaks light and life. You have the first 3 days of creation, which are the days of formation. And then the next 3 days are the days of filling. And then at the very end, God says, it is very good. That's it. This is the process. You also see this in the Gospels. Jesus heals a blind man with dirt and spit. And when he touches his eyes the first time, he says, I see people walking around like trees. And then Jesus does the miracle again. And then he says, and then he could see clearly. It's a journey. It's a process. Friend, I pray you walk through that process. You walk from that uncertainty to understanding and to the final conclusion of the matter. Walk it all the way through. Walk through the contradiction. The messy is in the middle, because some things make sense and some things don't make sense. You have to walk it all the way through to the end. Father, I pray for my friend to walk it out all the way till everything makes sense. Live in light of that moment when they will appear before their Creator. Help them to put their faith in Jesus as their Savior and Lord. That's a good word in this day, my friend. Walk it out. I'm walking it out too. If you like this type of teaching, feel free to join, like, subscribe, comment, even give to the Breath of God Ministries. I'm looking for 5 partners to give 1,000 or 1,000 partners to give $5 a month to support this ongoing teaching ministry. And remember, friend, His breath is our calling. Bye.